that delivered. Amazing. Right, so this week I always do my wee poll to see what you want to cook, and this week it was between teriyaki tempeh or sorry, I can hear myself back. I got it on my phone there. It was between teriyaki tempeh or spicy bean burger. And spicy vegan burger, we've had it on the poll for 2 weeks in a row now, and it starts in the lead and then it gets pipped to the post at the last minute. And this was our closest week yet. It was 45% to 55%, and it swung in the favour of teriyaki tempeh. So I'm sorry for anyone who's watching that voted for spicy bean burger. We will do it another week. I promise you we will. We really will. However, it's not going to be next week. But for good reason. We've got something exciting coming up next week, because I've been sent some of these awesome Mara seaweed samples, and so it's basically, it's seaweed, and it's just dried, and you can use it almost like a kind of salt, like an alternative to salt, but it's got a wonderful taste of the ocean. So I'm going to cook with some of these next week. So my choices, I'm thinking, are we've got a superfood chowder, which is probably one of my favourite lunches on the Feel Good Food plan, and that uses seaweed. So we could do that recipe with the Mara seafood, or I really want to try tofu and chips. So I was thinking we could use, normally when I do like vegan alternative fish and chips, I use jackfruit, which is all right. It's got a really good texture. But I'm not that massive a fan of jackfruit, to be perfectly honest. So we wanted to try some tofu fish and chips for ages. And I thought, actually, if we sear it and use some of the seaweed, that could be super awesome. And having stuck my finger in these already, I haven't cooked with them yet, but I have tasted them. They taste amazing. They really have an awesome kind of taste of the ocean. So I think we can make some super tasty tofu and chips, maybe with some vegan beer batter and sweet potato wedges and mushy peas. Could be awesome. So, I won't rig the polls at all, but if you could vote for that one, clearly that's the one I want to make. So anyway, I'll put up the poll on that later on in the week. Let's get down to business. Let's get cooking. So give me a chef's hat if you're cooking. Give me a wave if you're watching. We've got a little technical hitch, so we're just going to have to cut for 1
Okay, you just...
Am I good?
No, that's cool. Okay, you're live.
Sorry about that, guys. I've got no idea what went wrong, but something went wrong. So brief intermission, we're back, and let's get down to business. So let's go through the ingredients. To today, by the way, if you didn't catch the first part, it was basically just all waffle. We haven't started cooking yet, so we're going to start cooking right now. So, ingredients for today, we're making for 2 people. We have 200 grams of tempeh. Now, this is tempeh, the tofu company tempeh, which is available in most major supermarkets. Not sponsored, just bought, which I'm using today. To be honest, I often use, and more than often, I will go to the Chinese supermarket if there's one nearby you, and you can get double the amount for the same price. So if you happen to live close by a Chinese supermarket, I always go to the one on Leith Walk, the green and orange one, PCY, and yeah, you get double the amount, 400 grams for about £2. So it's a bargain. So you've got your tempeh, we've got about 100 grams of quinoa. So I always sort of have a rule of 50 grams per portion. So you've got quinoa there, 100 grams of button mushrooms, 100 grams of mange tout, 1 spring onion. I've got 2 there because mine's widdly. So, but 1 or 2 spring onions, depends on how big they are. Half a teaspoon of garlic powder. If you don't have garlic powder, you can just use a fresh clove of garlic and crush it. A teaspoon of sesame seeds, a tablespoon of maple syrup, half a teaspoon of corn flour, a couple tablespoons of soy sauce, half a teaspoon of Tabasco. I've run out of Tabasco. Cameraman drinks it by the bottle, so it disappears every time I buy it. So I'm going to use sriracha instead, but it should be Tabasco, but sriracha will do just fine. Somebody asked actually earlier in the comments, can you skip that, or is there an alternative if you can't take spice? Yeah, just leave it out. It just adds a little bit of an edge, but doesn't make too much difference. So just leave it out if you're not into spicy stuff. We need 2 tablespoons of sesame oil and a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, but white wine vinegar does just the same job. So I'm just using that. And that's it. Right, let's get cooking. So first up, we're starting with our tempeh. So keep that on the table. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get a small saucepan, about this size, with about 1 inch of water in the bottom. I'm going to put that on the hob and bring it to a boil. And we're basically going to use that as a steamer because we're going to put the sieve over it. And then we're going to cut our tempeh into approximately just 2 centimetre rounds, slices. That's much less than 2 centimetres. That's my measuring all off there. Slightly over 1 centimetre pieces. Even size pieces, that's the key bit. They can be whatever dimension you want, but you want them to make sure they're even. And then what we're going to do is we're going to steam the tempeh before we cook it. And this is a critical part. Well, for me, I think it's critical. A lot of people skip it because it's a pain. But actually, what steaming it does is, I don't really know what it does, but it kind of, it makes the texture much better, and it also makes it more absorbent or something, so it absorbs the flavour much better. So it's definitely worth taking the time to do it. So what we're going to do is basically just pop that in the sieve, like so, and then when that water underneath it comes to the boil, it's basically just going to steam the tempeh. So just steam it for about 10 minutes, flip it halfway, and yeah, just let it open up. It's like putting your face above some boiling water. It opens up all its pores and then lets it absorb all the flavour. So whilst we're giving our tempeh a facial, we can get started on cooking our quinoa. So if you've cooked me before, you'll probably be like, she never normally does this. And you're right, believe it or not, I'm a bit of a lazy chef. If there's a shortcut, I'll take it. But if you're eating quinoa in, like I would do it for a salad, or if you're eating quinoa in a way that you really want to taste the flavour of the quinoa, it's definitely worth doing this because it kind of like helps it release its nutty flavour. So we're basically just going to dry roast it. So if you get a small saucepan on a kind of medium heat, we're basically just going to pop the quinoa in there and just a thin layer, and yeah, just going to let it dry roast. And that will just, you'll smell it as it happens. It sort of smells like grains roasting, although quinoa is technically a pseudo grain, it's not a grain. Yeah, you'll sort of start to smell it roasting. And then at that point, we're just going to cook it in water as we normally would, pop it in a saucepan, bring it to the boil, and then simmer it down. But this part at the beginning just kind of helps it release a bit of extra flavour. We're all about the flavours. So let those do their thing. And meanwhile, let's get the marinade ready. So this is what we're going to put the tempeh in once it's finished having its facial. So it's just a tablespoon of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of water, and half a teaspoon of garlic powder. The only reason I use garlic powder rather than fresh garlic is because it dissolves a bit better in the liquid. So, but I mean, it's absolutely fine if you just got fresh garlic; it will do the job as well. It's just about getting the flavour in there, so that's fine. So 2 teaspoons of water and 1 teaspoon of soy sauce. And then we're just going to give that a bit of a mix with a fork, just to kind of try and mix through that garlic powder. You can use hot water if you like, it will dissolve either way, so it's not really a big deal. And yeah, it's literally that much. Sorry, I should have said, the reason I'm putting it in a shallow dish is because we're going to marinate the tempeh in here afterwards, so try and put it in a dish that you think will fit one single layer of your tempeh pieces, which this should. All right, delicious. So we're just going to set that to one side and make our teriyaki sauce. So for that, you want to get yourself a jug, and then we're going to put in all of the other elements of the sauce. So this is the second step that the tempeh is going to go through after it's marinated. So another tablespoon of soy sauce goes in there. A tablespoon of sesame oil. I love the smell of sesame oil. Teaspoon of white wine or apple cider vinegar. There we go. Half a teaspoon of Tabasco. Sriracha or Tabasco. I mean, it's supposed to be Tabasco you're using. I'm using Sriracha. I'm doing a swap. I love a swap. A tablespoon of maple syrup. It's going to take a sweet little time to get out of here, isn't it? Oh, hold up, I can smell the quinoa. Don't let it burn. So as soon as you smell it, that means that it's done. You don't want to burn it, you don't want to brown it, you're just slightly roasting it. So, can you see that? It's not changed color. Can you smell it? No. But if you could smell it, you'd be like, oh yes, I see what you mean. Amy, you're cooking. Is your quinoa smelling good? So once your quinoa is starting to smell good, we will come back to that dressing. It's going nowhere. Transfer it into a small saucepan. Sorry, I'm just trying to guide it in there without burning myself, which is a bit of a tricky business. Maybe use a spoon. Perfect. And then pop that onto the boil. So with the quinoa, the rule of thumb is you want double the amount of liquid to the quinoa. So that's about 100 grams of quinoa. So you want just over 200, so say 220 milliliters of water roughly. And with those quantities, the quinoa should absorb all of the water and you won't need to drain it. But that said, it's really not an issue if you do drain your quinoa and it doesn't absorb all the water. Meanwhile, you can see our tempeh is steaming away here. You can see the steam coming from it. So I'm just going to flip these over so it gets steamed well on both sides and opens its pores on both sides. Excuse the fingers. And you'll start to smell the tempeh as well. It's not necessarily the nicest smell as it's cooking. It's fermented soybean, so yeah, that's not the most delicious smell when it's cooking like that. But once it's full of flavour, it's absolutely delicious taste. So Trust the process. So yeah, we're going to leave the quinoa to come to the boil, then we'll reduce it to simmer. Let the tempeh continue to steam just for a little bit longer. It doesn't need too long, like I say, about 5 minutes each side. And then let's finish this marinade. What else do we have to put in it? So far in there, we have got, what have we got in there? Tell me. A tablespoon of maple syrup, a tablespoon of soy sauce, a tablespoon of sesame oil, a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, half a teaspoon of Tabasco, and half a teaspoon of corn flour. That's it. Then just give it a whisk. Hi Mel, I didn't see your wave there. And basically you just want this to combine together and thicken up ever so slightly. Okay, and it's not a lot of sauce you've got there at all. You don't need a lot. It's about quality, not quantity. So let's set that to one side. Okay, at this point, I'm going to take our tempeh. There's not really a way of knowing when you've steamed it for long enough, but you can, when you can start to smell it cooking, you can smell that sort of soybean smell or fermented. I don't really know how to describe the smell, but when you can smell it cooking, then that's a good sign. So it's had roughly 5 minutes on each side. I've probably cut it slightly short because we're cooking along together, but all good. So then you just want to pop it into the marinade. Oh, tight, but just. Pop it into the marinade, and then we're just going to give it about 5 minutes on each side, if it even takes that long. You basically just want it to absorb all the marinade. Flip it halfway to make sure it's absorbed on both sides, and that's absorbing all that beautiful soy garlic flavour. Just pop that to one side. Okay, so next up, we can prep our veg for the stir fry. Just clear the board. So what we're going to put in the stir fry is spring onions, mange tout, and button mushrooms. But of course, as always, feel free to make any swaps that you fancy, and whatever you like. If you wanted to put some red peppers in there, if you wanted to put some courgettes in there, you know, whatever you've got in your fridge will do absolutely fine. These are great because they all cook so quickly, so it just means it's a really super quick and easy weeknight meal if you don't want to spend too long in the kitchen. So just take off any outer edges. That's my quinoa up to the boil, so I'm just going to turn it down to a simmer now, and then it can just simmer away for about 8 to 10 minutes until it's cooked. Spring onion, just finely slice it. Always rolls off the board. I never used to use spring onions all that much, but I love cooking with them now. I tend to opt for a spring onion over a regular onion when I'm stir frying. It's just less mess, not quite so pungent taste, works a treat. And then our mange tout, I'm going to top and tail them, just because I don't like that stringy bit that sometimes peels off in your mouth if you don't do it. I know that's a weird thing, and it's probably not going to happen on any of them now. But it's one of these strange little veg phobias I've got, which you probably all think I'm absolutely nuts, but hey-ho, what's new there? I love the smell of mange tout as well. Absolutely love it. I'm not going to cut them down any smaller because it's quite nice to have the kind of crunch of the whole mange tout in the dish. But by all means, feel free to. If you'd rather slice them in half or thirds to make them a little bit more bite-sized, then be my guest. And then same with the mushrooms, depending on how big your mushrooms are, whether you've got button mushrooms or close-cut mushrooms, you can either leave them whole. Oof, Little voice break there. Leave them whole or cut them in half or quarter, depending on how big they are. So let's see, mine are quite small. I'm gonna cut that bad boy in half. Yeah, I'm gonna half them. Maybe not all of them. We want to get them fairly equal sizes, so I'm gonna cut half, cut some, and leave the little ones whole. Okay. Mel, have you had this dish on our mix and match meals? I'm trying to remember if it's one that you order or not. You might be familiar with it if it is. I think you have actually. So yeah, if you're still watching, you can tell everyone whether it's just my favourite or not. I think mushroom stroganoff's your favourite actually. It's funny. I love getting a sense of what customers' tastes are by seeing what they order all the time. Cool. So now I'm going to set this one aside. We don't need the water anymore. Now I'm just going to bring my quinoa frying pan back onto medium heat. I'm going to pop another tablespoon of sesame oil onto the frying pan, and just stir frying the veg in sesame oil just gives it just an extra degree of yumminess. I absolutely love sesame oil, it's just so tasty. So pop in our spring onion first. Try not to let it run away, it's going to roll all over the cooker here, isn't it? Pop that in first and let that get a little bit of a head start on the mange tout and the button mushrooms, just to kind of let that flavour really. My cooker's clean. I clean it every Monday morning for you guys. Just going to turn that quinoa up a little bit so it simmers away. Yeah, let our spring onion get a little head start, and then we'll add the mange tout and the button mushrooms. That looks good. That smells amazing. And let's just, whilst that's happening, flip over our tempeh. Make sure it's absorbing equally on both sides. Starting to look yummy. Okay, just let that continue to sit there for a bit longer. Once your spring onion starts to bubble, we can add our mange tout and our mushrooms. You can smell that sunflower oil, sesame oil. It smells amazing. All right, excuse the hands, that seemed less effort than picking up the board. Just give that a mix through and let it all brown, but especially with these veg, you don't want it to overcook. You kind of basically just want to saute them really briefly, let them brown off, let the mushrooms release some of their waters, but you want to keep a crunch in the mange tout. You don't want them sort of like floppy and lifeless. And you want to keep a nice vibrant green to it all as well. Come on, Mr. Quinoa, you're not having much fun over here. I want a little bit more of a bubble in him. Turn that up slightly. And now we're really just waiting. I'm going to wait for our tempeh to absorb a little bit more of the marinade. This tempeh doesn't seem quite as absorbent as the stuff I normally use from the Chinese supermarket, actually. Dun, dun, dun. Don't worry. It will be delicious. I have faith. There we go. See, just starting to get a lovely brown on the bottom of the mushrooms there. Ooh, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And they got a lovely sesame glaze all over them as well. Just going to give them a few more minutes. So if anyone's curious about tempeh and what it's all about, Oh, did you know it's because I've not actually turned the quinoa up. I turned the heat up on the stir fry, not the quinoa. So if anyone's curious about tempeh and what it's all about, whether it's good for you, and all that sort of stuff, check out we've not done an IGTV video for ages, but I think the last one on there is one of our superfood or hype videos, which is about tempeh. So check that out, and it'll tell you all about it. But basically, it's just fermented soybeans. So personally, I'm not such a massive fan of processed meat substitutes. I've never really got on board with them. I'm always more about like using pulses and beans and stuff like that to get my protein and quinoa, rather than any of the processed meats, because if you look at them, they're full of like stabilizers and additives and preservatives and all the rest of it. So I tend to steer away from it. I also don't particularly like the taste of them because they tend to be loaded with loads of flavorings to make it taste like meat. And I guess the stabilizers do something for the texture of meat as well. I'm just going to turn the veg off there because it's looking awesome. And you see that? We've got a little bit of charring, got some browning on the mushrooms. That looks incredible. So yeah, I've never been a big fan of processed meat alternatives. So, but tempeh is fantastic. It's got such a good texture, like in terms of a meaty, I think it's the meatiest meat alternative if you want. I do like tofu, especially if it's baked or cooked in a way that's kind of different and more delicious than your sort of standard chopped up and stuck in a stir fry, which is the standard but kind of lazy way to cook with tofu. But tempeh, just so meaty and delicious. Right, so now that our tempeh has marinated, just gonna flip her over once more. Yes, she's a she. I'm not sure why, but she is. And then we're just gonna pour our teriyaki sauce over the top. Nice. I've just poured it over the marinade because the marinade isn't overly pungent and gives it some extra flavour, rather than taking it out of the marinade and then doing that. Flip it over once again to make sure that it's fully coated in this delicious teriyaki sauce. Once again. And then, my veg is off, it's still just sizzling away vigorously. Check in on your quinoa. See how it's doing. Looks like it's getting close. Still some cooking to do, so that's fine. Try not to burn the handle. Leave that simmering away. Tiny drizzle of oil in another frying pan. Sorry, you do need 2 frying pans for this. Put it onto a medium heat. And then it's time to cook the tempeh. So take them over to the hob, and I'm gonna just get a bit more coverage on that first. And then just put them on. And then you basically just need 2 to 3 minutes each side. And then we're going to pour over the teriyaki sauce and let it caramelize. And that's it. Oh, Mel. Loads, I order every time, one of my faves. Ah, that's the tempeh. That's the teriyaki tempeh. There we go. Testimonial. Here's Mel. She orders it all the time. She eats it. She loves it. You're in for a treat. Amy, you're cooking along. If it doesn't work out well, don't blame my recipe. Amy's our star cook alonger right now. She made the tiramisu, or coconut tiramisu, that we made. We made that quite a few weeks ago now. She made that at the weekend, and I didn't see a photo actually, Amy. You'll have to send me a photo of it. Let me know how it went down. But yeah, I love seeing it when our cook-along recipes make it out into the real world. Love it, just love it. Here the tempeh sizzle. That's perfect. We'll just give it a few minutes. We want to let it brown on its first side before we flip it. Tongs are quite essential here, actually. I should have said that in your equipment. I think I had it in the equipment. Much better than a fish slice for tempeh. It can be a slippery little bugger. Any questions, anyone? Oh, we've got a natural pause here. Let me know if you've got any questions. Or any requests, if you've got any special requests for things to cook coming up. I think we've got the next 2 weeks lined up. We've got a seafood thing next week, so we'll do a poll on which seaweed thing. And then I think we better do the burger the next week. You've been asking for it quite a long time and it keeps getting picked at the post, so I think we better do it. It was loved. That's Amy talking about her coconut tiramisu. That's brilliant. Because I think you were feeding it to Julie, weren't you? And she is quite the connoisseur. So if it was loved by them, I think big win. Right, so now we're going to just flip it. And you can see a little bit browned. And then we're just going to let it do the same on the other side. If your frying pan's looking quite dry, you might want to add, not the full thing, but just add a couple tablespoons of the teriyaki sauce just to keep it all moist and nothing sticking. You don't want anything sticking. Ewan wants the burger. Okay, 2 weeks time, Ewan, we'll do the burger. Actually, I loved it. So, you know, was it last week? Was it last week we did the cranberry orange and carrot loaf? I think it was. I loved it. Ewan sent me a photo afterwards of the bowl. You know how I said that bowl, the beige bowl that absolutely everyone has? It's like the baking bowl, the mother's baking bowl. Sent me a photo. He also has the mother's baking bowl and made a very good point. He's like, you don't even buy it, it just appears in the cupboard. And that's so true. I've actually got no idea. I categorically did not buy that bowl. And I don't think it's my mum's either, so it's just appeared. It's like the strange baking bowl story of everyone's life. Or maybe it's just a northeast thing, actually. Is that just a specifically Aberdeenshire thing? Has anyone else got that bowl? Right, the quinoa is looking just about ready. Let's check it. Do you know what? And I'm really not just saying this. That tastes so much better having dry roasted it before boiling it. It really does. It's not quite cooked yet. It needs a little bit longer. But the flavour of it is far superior to when I just cook it and don't roast it first. So yeah, hope you did it. Right, let's check. Flipper tempeh again, looking gorgeous. And at this point, I'm just going to turn the heat right down on it. I'm actually going to move it to a cooler hob because this one in the middle's somewhat vigorous. And then at this point, you can pour over the rest of the tempeh, the teriyaki sauce. And you just want to let that kind of caramelize slightly. And then it will come into a nice thick sauce. Let it caramelize, let the tempeh kind of soak it up. And that's going to be delicious. Andy's still needing burger help, Amy says. Okay, the burger is coming. So 2 weeks time, the burger. We're going to do fingers crossed for tofu and chips next week, and then we'll do the burger the week after. We've got a plan. Morag, I've got that bowl too. There we go. No, so it's not just a northeast thing then. Yeah, it's the mystery baking bowl. It just appears. I love it. Right. So if your quinoa's done, we're done, my friends. That's pretty good. going to drain out of that and we can serve it up. Sorry. There we go. And then I'm just going to turn off the tempeh because I want to keep some of that sauce. I don't want it to completely reduce. So we can drizzle it over the top. Right. All that's left to do now is to plate it up. Get your favourite plate. Appropriately sized. Or not. I'm feeling quite hungry. This is supposed to serve 2 people. Oh. No, it does. It's actually quite generous. Right, so first up, a wee bed of quinoa. Just gonna let it drain a little bit more. I don't want it to be soggy, so I'm just give it a wee shiggle. Okay. Bed of quinoa. And then some of our stir-fried veggies on top of that. Make sure you get a bit of everything. Delicious. And then 2 chunks of our beautifully cooked tempeh. That looks amazing, doesn't it? Oh, it's not going to sit for me. Come on. Slimy. Slimy in a good way, obvs. And then I'm just going to spoon over a little bit of this caramelized tempeh sauce as well. Teriyaki sauce as well, sorry. Yum. And then, last but not least, and this is more about making it look Insta-worthy than it is about flavour, so don't worry if you don't have sesame seeds. Sprinkle sesame seeds. Oh, I've managed to get sauce all over the edge of the plate. God. I am far from Insta-worthy, that's for sure. Wipe your spillages and enjoy. I hope you do enjoy it, guys. Honestly, I think it's a delicious one and actually pretty easy to make. I'm not sure how long we were there. A little bit longer because I had a technical hitch and I chat a lot. But if you don't have all that faff, then you can definitely make it in under half an hour and it tastes a bomb. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. Let me know if you've got any questions. I will put the full recipe on our blog. So if you didn't cook along, but you want to do it later, then check out the blog and you'll get the full recipe there. And tag me in your photos if you make it. I'd love to see them. All right, please join me next week. I know you haven't asked for the seaweed, but you will love the seaweed. So join and cook along. It's actually surprisingly amazing how delicious seaweed is. So join me for that and then the burger the week after. All right, see you soon, guys.